Well, here we are back in the little studio apartment, what I call it, because of those. Anyway, good morning, folks. It's about, let's see, 5:15 in the morning here in central U.S. For some reason I woke up at 4. And decided to eat a little breakfast before I get to my regular duty station and clean the house and clothes and all those little things we must do. Well, anyway, in a previous video I told you how I met my now ex-Filipino wife and all the little ins and outs of that thing, kinda. So now we're going to start at the beginning. October the 13th, 1960, when I was born in a city called Bryan. If you're not from that area, you might call that College Station. And yes, it's the home of Texas A&M University. We don't claim that either. But anyway, I was born there and lived there, I guess, until I was about 2.5. And my dad got a job in another little town about 20 miles south of there called Navasota. Excuse me. Well, he worked for a guy called Mr. Believe it or not, Hitchcock, like Alfred. And this old man looked just like Alfred Hitchcock, but he was good. He was a really good man. Gruff, rough, tough, but you could trust his word. Whatever he said, that's the way it was. And now for my first little memory, I guess it was around 3. I'm sitting in front of TV watching cartoons. And I don't even remember what cartoon, probably Looney Tunes or Felix the Cat or something like that. My mom and my older sister, who was 10 at the time, come running into the living room where I was sitting on the floor, eating a little bowl of cereal, watching my cartoons, and they changed the channel on me. They went to the news. So needless to say, I was not a happy child. Well, as I progressed in life, I realized that was the day John Kennedy got shot. So that was my very first memory. And you just kind of rock through life up until you're 10, 12 years old, before you really start actively remembering things instead of them just being there. Your brain processed it, but it didn't really mean anything to you. So I had some good times until I was about 10 in that little neighborhood where we lived. Had the noble kids down the street. They were slightly older than us. Then you had Robbie, Connie, and Sonny Stone down the end of the street. Our next door neighbors were the Pimentels. And they had come, their dad was an expert that worked for John Deere Tractor. And the company had moved him up here on a work visa. And let me see, the whole family was Mr. and Mrs. Pimentel. That's all I ever knew him by. The old man's name was Jacob, but he's Mr. Pimentel. You had Mr. and Mrs. Pimentel. You had Jacob Jr., Albert, Linda, Bertha, Ricky, Reuben, and Rudy. So they're our next door neighbors, and Ricky and Reuben were me and my brother's age. Rudy was just slightly older than us. And then of course Bertha, Linda, Jacob, and Albert were all older, up from like 15 to 20, right in that zone. So we had a good neighborhood. We had a lot of good times. We had a few bad times, fighting amongst ourselves and so on and such, as kids do. Fighting, 30 minutes later, they're over there sitting, laughing, having a good time. Well, my dad was a World War II vet. He was 9 years older than my mom. And I guess his shell shock, or PTSD as you'd call it, drove him to drink like a fish, womanized like crazy, and her mom said anything about it. Well, let's just say it didn't end well for her. She put up with him till my younger sister Melinda went into school, and we got a divorce. So here we are, 10 years old. We moved to another town, 25 miles away, called Brenham. Brenham was pretty good. It wasn't too bad. It's an old German town from way back in the colonization days when Mexico was bringing Europeans over to Texas. Tried to fill it up so the Americans couldn't find them. Didn't work out well for them. But anyway, these old Germans still had a little bit of a German accent. You could walk into a downtown bar at that time, it was 1970. And if you knew what you wanted, you could cozy up to that bar, you had the money, you could tell them what you wanted, and they'd give it to you, by God. 10 years old drinking a beer in a bar. Nah. Anyway, I never was a drinker or smoker or any of that kind of stuff. In fact, I didn't start that till I married my first wife. So, every year after that, it seems like we moved somewhere and stayed with my dad and his newest wife about a year before moved back with Mom to a little town called Centerville. Centerville, we moved to Fairfield, and that was pretty stable for us. In fact, my mom passed away there at 17. So. I have an older sister that still lives there with her husband. Has a nice little property. A few years back, when I didn't have anything else to do and trying to figure it all out all over again after the second divorce, I built a cabin. She let me build a cabin on her property. And I lived in that cabin without electricity, running water. Had one solar panel, a battery for lights, and a wood heater. And as I was going along cutting down all the dead trees off of her property and stuff, I stack them, split them, burn them. Had a good time living in the cabin. Had an old black cat that adopted me. Old Tom. Don't know where old Tom is, but he sure has a lot of kids. Solid black cat with a white tip on the end of his tail. Anyway, we just made it to Fairfield. I'm living good there. I'm not doing too bad. Did all my teenage years there, junior high, most of high school. Didn't really date nobody or anything. I had a job most of the time I was there. Of some sort, making as much money as I could. Riding an old 10-speed bicycle everywhere I went. Bought a car when I was 16, but my mom and oldest sister basically confiscated my car with the promise, oh, we'll take you and help you get your license. And they never did. So I got tired of them playing games with me, and I just pulled the coil wire to the center of the distributor cap off, and we called it good. Nobody had a car. So later on, after the older sister moved out with her boyfriend, I put the coil wire back on, pretty much gave Mom the car. And she had that car, all the way to the 80s when I went in the Army, and she traded it in, got a little Vegas station. But I turned 18 my senior year. I'd worked with my dad that summer, heavy equipment, dozers and stuff like that, which I learned how to operate when I was 6. And I moved down the house, and I moved down to a little town called Buffalo, about half an hour south of Fairfield. Barely finished high school, but I finished it. Then I went in the Army. Like I said, I never dated, didn't drink. One time when I was in high school, oh my God, I made a damn fool out of myself, let me tell you. But my strongest memories of those years with a goodness, a young lady. I think we didn't date, we just had like a 2 or 3 week romance. Getting hot in the room now, so boy, I'm gonna tell you what, that was my first kiss, but that's little old Annie put one on me, man. That's the best kiss. When you can still remember that first kiss, 50-something years later, it was something. So the next week, school had just started, and the county fair in Preston County, Texas, happened like the last week of August. We usually played our first football game around that time. So I show up at the fair. I just lived like 2 blocks away from the fairgrounds. And there's Annie and her sister, and I'm hanging out and shooting. Me and Annie just spent the night together there at the county fair and rode all the rides and shot the little guns for prizes and threw the baseballs for prizes and just had a good time. Pretty much after that, that was the end of the romance. Here she got married to some guy up toward Dallas area. I don't know much. I didn't keep up with too much at that time. I had one best friend that I still have. Met him in '74. Old John. And John will tell you straight up, that ain't my friend, that's my brother. He's a good guy. Another time we'll tell his story too. Anyway, I went in the Army. I was older than most of the young recruits. I was around 20 when I went in there. Most of the other guys, 17, 18, maybe 19. My captain, Brian Bostic, Jeff Bostic's brother. Look up Jeff Bostic, you'll see who he was. He's a good guy. I mean, when you weren't in the public and military discipline and courtesy and all that had to apply, he could talk, man. He'd talk to you. Real all-American kid from California, married a school teacher that was over there in Germany on a contract basis. And met some good guys in the military. Let me see, we got, what was Mike's last name? So 3 guys from Indianapolis I met in basic training, and we're all stationed pretty close together throughout the time in our military. You got Mark Scroggins. Mark married a young lady from Belize who had moved up to India, and he went to high school with her and did a couple of college classes. They live out in Colorado Springs now, and still married, still just got one son that's probably 40 years old now, somewhere in there. And then you got Edward Quintero. Now Ed, crazy little Ed, he got stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, which the name doesn't exist on the military rolls, but the place still exists and it's still a fort. Well, crazy Ed, he met a cousin of his from San Antonio while he was there, and one thing led to another, and Ed pretty much had a shotgun waiting. And haven't heard much from him since. He just went off the rails real deep. Then we have Mike, and I wish I could remember Mike's last name, but I called him Frogman, and because he wore those military black glasses and years later, boy, he got madder than hell at me. I hate it when you call me that. I said, dude, all you've ever had to do is tell me you didn't want me to do that. But anyway, so we're rocking on through the military. I get back to the States. I go to Fort Polk, Louisiana. It's March. It's somewhat cool, but me being stationed in Germany all those years, it was nothing to me. I mean, it felt like summer. That's about what you run, 50 degrees Fahrenheit in summer, in the place where I was stationed in Germany. And I'm looking at these boys and I'm thinking, they're all freezing to death. They got jackets and parkas on, and I'm walking around in a t-shirt. thinking it's like summer in Germany. Wow, nice. So they got to whining so much, I said, well, let me go out to my old pickup truck, get in the toolbox, and got the barbecue lighter out in the crescent wrench and went and traced the gas pipes down. Instead of having to turn a meter on, they just had one main meter for the whole army post. But each building had a valve that you could open and close. Well, I went outside and the valve was closed. So went back in, this little old feller from Iowa. I opened the panel up on the side of the heating unit. They didn't have AC in those buildings. They were from World War II. I lit the barbecue lighter. I said, you see that little pipe right there? I said, you light that barbecue lighter and you hold that flame right up close to it and holler at me when it lights. I went outside with the crescent wrench, opened the valve slowly. He hollered at me, the pilot light was lit, and they were happy as they could be. So that night, that day and that night, they all had their heat on. It wouldn't have been a big deal, but somebody that's freezing their little butt off happened to have some relatives from Shreveport and Alexandria, and they called them and said, hey, you need to get down here and take pictures. The general's got his fireplace going, keeping his house warm. Yet they've cut off all our power and all our heat. So, man, it raised a big stink because they did show that on TV. Anyway, come about April when it warmed up enough to sleep in comfort at night without the little boys freezing, they come back, cut the gas off. And I had some good times and some bad times at Fort Pope. Went out to the field for like 2-week survival training type thing, and I gained 10 pounds. And they were just amazed. They said, how in the hell did you gain weight on one box of sea rations a day? So I showed them the huckleberries and the blackberries, and we had some squirrel stew with some wild onions and stuff like that, because it's kind of like my native area here in Texas. A lot of the same plants and animals that are really good and really edible. And were the days. And there's some stories I don't even want to tell you because people behaving badly. But maybe we'll get into that one day, but not today. We're just doing a rough overview. We're going to try to get you up to 99, but I think that'll be enough for you today to question. And all I got to say is good morning, nice coffee, and we'll hit y'all with another video as soon as possible. Bye.